welcome everybody. Thank you for joining the Zadara and the Arrosoft team for our Cloud Migration Made Easy webinar today. We're very happy to have you here. I wanted to just run through a few housekeeping items before we get started. We will take Q&A at the end of the webinar for 15 minutes. Please use the chat button below or the Q&A to ask your questions, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. If we happen not to get to your question, we will send you an email with a follow-up and as an answer to your question. Also today, we're doing coffee and a gift card. So if you take a meeting with us, you will receive a $10 Starbucks gift card sponsored by Arrosoft. If you attend our webinar, and one lucky winner today will receive a $100 gift card if you stay on the webinar for the entire time. Okay, and then also wanted to let you know, you'll see some polling questions pop up during the webinar. If you wouldn't mind giving us your feedback, we would really appreciate it. I'm going to send it over to Jeff Francis, our CTO of Zadara, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to have your attendance today. So we'll just take a quick look at the agenda for today. So this is about VM migration made easy. We're going to start the presentation by speaking about what are the challenges that people typically encounter when they're migrating environments with VMs in there. A lot of you are probably coming to this session already today, having some experiences here, but we're going to use this as an anchor for how we describe how we can add a lot of simplicity to this process and also make it a lot more successful more often. Then we're going to follow up with a quick overview about Zadara and our hosting services, followed up by Arrosoft. And so we have Suresh here, CIO from Arrosoft, to be able to describe that. Then we're going to get right into why are people migrating and what are some of the use cases. So you'll see some popular use cases around migration activity, also around performing DR replication of environments. We'll wrap up with kind of a summary of everything we've just been told, everything we've seen, and then we'll have time for Q&A, as Lisa mentioned. So without further ado, allow me to introduce what the challenges for VM migrations are. So we know that migrating from site A to site B, in the most typical examples, we'll see that there's going to be an underlying technology change. It might be going from an on-prem hypervisor-based technology up to a public cloud with a hypervisor. It could be one on-prem site to another on-prem site. There's a lot of different combinations you're going to see, but what's universally true is that you're going to see a lot of these on-prem environments are going to have to go through some sort of network reconfiguration if they want to get to a cloud model somewhere. Now, what type of reconfigurations are we talking about? Most often, the reconfiguration we'll first see is in the network layer. So if a legacy environment is using VLANs, for example, for network or security isolation, these don't translate the same into a hyperscaler VPC model. They also have different challenges as you go to other models that are offered in the marketplace, like in Nutanix or something like that. We're going to show you ways that you can have a like network when you get to the destination side with the Zadara. So we can take a lot of that complexity right out the gate. But the first challenge that we see again is having to transform that environment, understanding how Active Directory is going to sync between that environment and some other hosted environment that you have. I'm going to get into the second bullet now and talk about unknown dependencies. It's true that you'll do everything you can to make sure that you understand how this environment interacts with its dependencies so that when you move it, it still operates the same way when it gets to site B. The challenge is that if you do find there are some unknown dependencies along the way, or if you find out during the day of migration, you have some troubles that you have to stitch up the differences there. How do you work with those unknown dependencies? So we have some solutions here to talk to you about that today. The other one, and this third one happens in the preparation steps, is you'll be migrating from an environment that might be on some older versions of guest operating systems. And again, just making a reference to the hyperscalers, if it's your intention to get to a cloud model, the hyperscalers will support the more recent iterations and versions of Linux and Windows. Specifically, you'll probably see things like Windows, certainly you'll see Windows Server 2022, Server 2019. In some of the clouds out there, you'll see support for 2016 Windows Server, but you'll start to see a number of clouds drop off in support. If you get down to Windows Server 2012, certainly 2008, there are 32-bit operating systems that are a no-go with some of the hyperscalers out there. So we're going to show you that there's, again, a way in leveraging this solution we're describing to you today to avoid those pitfalls, because you can support a lot of those legacy operating systems in your destination. The last bit that seems to plague a lot of VM migration projects is that it's very difficult to create accurate estimates around how long this is going to take. How long from the project planning perspective of all the preambles to discovery to planning to get site B all laid out, all the network dependencies issued and tested, and then the actual cutover day. There's a lot of performance variables that are in there. And based off of the robustness of your migration solution, we can take a lot of that complexity out to where cutover is actually a more simplistic part of the process, and is all the things that are done beforehand by automated software that can really help you with the whole bit about how long is this going to take, how much time do I need to plan for, the whole elapsed time question. So with these 4 items, we'll use these as an anchor today. Allow me to introduce to you the Zadara Edge Cloud Services. So the catalog of our services, so by the way, who is Zadara? So we started back in 2011. We own and develop and operate our own software. So we have patents that go back all the way to 2011. Many of you may know us as heavyweights in the storage as a service field. We're going to talk about that in just a moment when we talk about the analysts out there, how they look at Zadara. But also in 2020, we've also added to our catalog a full stack. What is that full stack? So as you see here on the screen, we have a full offer around VM hosting services, containerized services. In the networking tiers in our hosted offer, we also offer VPC networking with all that robustness. We also support modes around VLAN-based networking, so we can be very compatible with a lot of legacy environments that want to come over. We also contain a lot of those new technologies and software-defined networking features like people enjoy in the hyperscalers today, such as load balancers with high availability, or auto scale groups with the capability of understanding either network loads or memory loads or CPU loads and being able to spawn more of the same. So your applications can stretch only according to business demands and be able to shrink when business demands go lower. So all of those modern capabilities that you've come to enjoy from the hyperscaler catalogs, we have those here, as you'll see represented in this solution set. The other part of our service catalog that's important to note is that from our original early days, we also have a wide variety of services in the storage tier and a long heritage there. What's unique about Zadara is that if you want to have dedicated storage media and dedicated storage controllers for each of your tenants in a multi-tenant situation, it could be different departments in the same company, or you might be a managed service provider that you have different companies that are diverse tenants themselves. We can guarantee you isolation, and you can offer instrumentation for your customers to look at in our service portal, where they can get all the way down to drive assemblies and all the way down to storage controllers. So they can look at the utilization, the latency, all of the detailed bits, just like you had your own hardware as you would have bought it in an on-prem type of solution. You get that level of visibility. You can get that level of visibility all the way down to the base components with Zadara when you choose to isolate drives, controllers, all of the storage array for single tenants. Now, another reference to the catalog, wanted to point out that we do offer our solution. So Zadara is all Zadara titled. It's hardware, our software, our 24/7 support. So we're managing these things for availability and performance 24/7 by 365. Like the hyperscalers, we're also maintaining all of the software that delivers this infrastructure or platform as a service, depending on which services you're getting. So we manage those to stay on current version numbers and all of those bits. And this is also backed by expert support. So we do have a ticketing system. We also have a phone number to call. We have a closer to the customer type of experience that supports this whole catalog that you see here. Just pressing one more time on the whole bit that it's Zadara's hardware that's involved in here. That means, like the hyperscalers, it's on us to make sure that we have enough hardware in place and that we're working with you to understand that if we have an on-prem system with you, we're forecasting for capacity needs. So that, again, as you have automation that's provisioning things, or you're in the GUI yourself and doing these activities around spinning things up, spinning things down, that the hardware is going to be there to be able to support your needs. When you use one of our public clouds that are located across 6 different countries, you'll find that those public clouds, we're managing all that capacity already ourselves. So we take care of all that hardware capacity planning. The last bit I want to touch on before we move off the service catalog is that the way customers buy service from Zadara, it is familiar to what you've heard with the hyperscalers, is you pay by the hour for only what you provision. So we don't have a price for a physical router or a data switch or a drive tray or any of those other server assemblies. What we have a price by the hour for is a 2x8 virtual machine or a storage appearance of 73 gigabytes. You'll pay by the gigabyte. That sounds pretty familiar, right? The nice advantage to a Zadara solution is that our pricing is radically simplified compared to what you'll find in the marketplace. It's as simplified as we have prices for VMs. They have 3 different sizes. They have compute optimized, general purpose, and memory optimized VMs. You might know those as hyperscalers as being 2-to-1, 4-to-1, and 8-to-1 memory ratios. We have a price for storage on the storage side, so EBS volumes, and that goes by the gigabyte. And then if you're in our public clouds, we have a way for you to be able to prearrange how much internet service you want. But that's it. We don't have data egress fees, no API charges. You don't have variable charges for VMs get hot and run very, very hot. There's a very simple model to our catalog here. Let's now take a look at where is Zadara. So we have over 500 locations under management. That is, again, 365 days out of the year, 24/7. We're supporting these locations. Most of the lion's share of these locations, most of these locations are where we have an on-prem solution with a dedicated customer. They choose us because we are that expandable pay-for-use service where you can get that inside your own 4 walls. Sounds pretty attractive, right? It's the alternative to going ahead and forecasting that you've bought the right hardware at the right time and you got the lead times that you need. So again, you see all these countries, all this coverage. We deliver a 5 nines SLA for our storage service customers, which would be all of these customers because our stack begins with storage and then it goes full stack to the compute on top of that. And so this gives you the assurance that this software and this solution scale very well and are delivered at scale. The other thing to know about Zadara is that the industry analysts like us too. There's a number of reports out there about Zadara. We just highlighted one here from the GigaOM analyst. And so what they've done, you can see this is a little bit of an eye chart to look at, but there's a lot of details they looked at from the ability to test, acquire, ease of use, the billing experience, the customer service experience, the upgrade experience. All of those things have been ranked. And you'll see in here that they've put us in a favorable position compared with who? The tier 1 providers that you know and know very well. So it's the HPEs, the Dells, the others out there in the marketplace. Also, we have analysts that report us very well when it comes to that alternative to the hyperscalers. So again, just wanted to share with you that there's a lot of review information about Zadara to be had out there, but we do review it very well. Let's talk about Arrosoft for a moment and introduce them. Suresh?
Thank you, Jeff. Hope everyone is having a great morning, afternoon, the North America time zone. So thanks for taking time to talk to us. Let me quickly introduce who we are, right? We claim ourselves as the emerging data center transformation service provider, right? That's why we have categorized the 4 different pillars. And it's a great synergy between Arrosoft and Zadara, right? We eat our own cookies, right? We have our own data centers. We run edge cloud from Zadara. And that also allowed us to adopt a journey to support the various other pillars, right? We do offer backup as a service with the help of all the different backup vendors that we serve as an MSP, and also provide DR as a service because it's a data lifecycle, data fabric, right? You bring in, ingest your data or compute into edge cloud provider like Zadara. What do you need after that? Your application should be up and running. You got to make sure that the primary or production data is protected well, right? There comes backup as a service, offering data protection services. After that, okay, now I have a backup copy. What is my business continuity disaster recovery? That's where DR comes in. So we offer the DR as a service. Our leverage towards using the Cloud platform, which we are going to talk about in upcoming slides, is to help you guys to the journey through accomplishing the migration from any hyperscalers, right? Especially VMware into Zadara zCompute in a seamless manner with a turnkey solution and also ease of operation, very simplistic licensing form factor, right? Last but not least, we cannot leave any stones unturned, right? We also want to touch upon the cybersecurity perspective. We have a couple of homegrown softwares outside of Cloud.NE. We have something called AirGap, which provides a subject secured backup solution for any backup vendor. We are very agnostic. Arrosoft Stealth does the same functionality. And then we do have an MSP program with Sentinel-1. Next slide, Jeff. So now Jeff started with a great segue, right? Say, hey, you guys are here for some reason, right? You wanted to know who Zadara is. What is the main functionality and how can we accomplish our journey of migrating from VMware or any aging hypervisor, any aging hardware? You might have gone through some hurdles, some pain in the process that you're trying to accomplish to move away from your existing data center to a cloud provider like Zadara. So that's the reason that you're here, right? So what we have done, working in tangent with Zadara, we have developed a platform called Cloud.NE. This software allows you to perform and execute, I would call it as rehosting / migration of compute with application and crash consistent mechanism, right? I'm not saying there are not tools available, right? There are multiple different cloud providers. We talk about the cloud vendors, beginning from public cloud providers like the giants like AWS, Azure, Zadara is part of it. You have Google, you have Huawei, you have Virtuoso. There's so many cloud providers. Don't they have these kind of tools and bells and whistles to perform the migration? Yes, they do. But are they all simplistic and can they migrate from any to any? Can you migrate from, let's say, AWS to Azure? No, they won't support, right? Because they want to have the affinity within their cloud provider. What we have developed Cloud.NE in order to provide the flexibility and also keep the ease of operation, right? We can migrate from any hypervisor platform to any cloud provider. In our use case, we're talking about Zadara. And the primary use case is VMware. There are 3 different use cases I'm going to highlight here. It's a very simple form factor. All you need is like 2 infrastructure components. One is a proxy server on the source side and a target server on the Zadara side, right? With VMware, it's all agent-less based migration, which means we can natively integrate using API commands with the vCenter, discover hundreds and hundreds of VMs that could be running in an environment. Could be Windows, could be Linux. Different flavors of Linux are supported. Multiple different versions of Windows are supported in here, right? Then you may ask a question, okay, great, Suresh, you support VMware. What about physical servers? What about non-VMware infrastructure? What if you want to come out of like, Hyper-V? What if you want to come out of Red Hat Linux forward? What about Citrix Zen, right? We absolutely support that. Those are considered as agent-based migration, where we put in a small payload and we absolutely migrate the host in a consistent manner, bare metal migration. That's what we call it, right? So in the user's use case scenario, it's very transparent. Once the migration is done, it accesses 2 different data center, 2 different data copies. So from a Zadara perspective, once the migration is done, all you need to do is like similar to if you guys coming from SAN world, there's a terminology called provision. All you need to do is like go to our Cloud.NE application, HTML web page, pick and choose the VM that you migrated, right click and say, hey, provision. Absolutely, it'll spin off the VM in a converted form factor and bring it up with absolutely the same way how the source was. No changes in application, no changes in operating system, adopting the network technology that Zadara offers, right? It's a pretty seamless turnkey approach. Next slide, Jeff. These are some of the popular use cases that we support. It does not mean other use cases outside of this we can support. Our tool is very agile and agnostic that we can work with. Primary use case that I want to focus on, right? A lot of people, a lot of customers are going through pains and trying to come out of VMware because of all the support nuances, pricing, licensing increases going on. Very simple, as long as we can attach ourselves in the environment to your vCenter through proper credentials, deploy our target server in Zadara Compute, it's a straightforward migration, right? The key here is like, make sure that the migration transformation phases is very simple, right? Tagging along with that, all these migration are supported, can be supported by Arrosoft professional services team in a white glove format, which means be it 5 VMs, 10 VMs, 20 VMs, hundreds of VMs, you always get a progressive manner of tagging along a project manager, treating every single thing as a production use case migration. So there'll be timelines, you'll be given project plans, you'll be defined what kind of resources you would need in Zadara in order to perform this migration. Once the migration is done, we test out the migration, document them as standard operating procedures, and hand out. Like coming out of the use case number one, you can go to Zadara and don't just stop there, right? Now you migrated your data and you want to expand within Zadara cloud, right? Zadara, as you saw on the second slide from Jeff, there are multiple different Zadara edge cloud data centers. Let's say you have your production in East Coast and you want to establish a DR in West Coast, you can absolutely replicate it. And once the data set is sitting in Zadara, that's where the second use case comes in. Zadara to Zadara replication can happen. And you want to adopt a hybrid cloud approach, right? You have infrastructure running in AWS because of the NIST standards. In order to prevent ransomware attacks, you are considering, hey, what I want to consider a different cloud provider in order to host my data. So AWS or Azure or any other cloud provider have some issues that they went down, right? Because anything may happen, considering the CrowdStrike incident happened in the past few weeks ago, right? So in order to avoid these ambiguous situations, we always recommend our customers to hybrid cloud. So you have your primary data sitting in AWS. Why don't you consider Zadara as your secondary target, right? So we can absolutely migrate and consider that as a live sync happening in a periodical manner. You can have physical legacy hardware sitting in your data center. You can have an application running on 2008, even 2003 Windows, but you want to move to cloud. There are a lot of dependencies that you need to go through. Our methodological manner of migration takes care of the whole life cycle, and you can migrate it seamlessly to Zadara. There is no command line interface. You don't need to go to shell prompt, run PowerShell scripts to discover X, Y, Z, right? It's a simplistic deployment. Once the tool is deployed, I think our tool can be deployed in worst case scenario also under 20 minutes, right? As long as we have the infrastructure available. And last but not least, you can even ask a question saying, hey, Suresh and Jeff, I have a very low latency link. I have a very secure site. I don't want to expose my data center to any outside world. I have completely locked down, right? Totally fine, right? You probably have come across like cloud provider shipping boxes like the Snowball and data boxes, right? We do provide those support as long as the JBot can be attached to our proxy server on-premise. The migration can happen and you can ship it to Zadara. Then the copy can happen, attach it to the target server, poof, the migration is done, right? So we made sure when we developed this platform, our software needs to be agile and agnostic and as customizable for the customer's requirement and keep it very simple. I follow the principle of KISS, right? Keep it as simple as possible. Thank you, Jeff. Next slide.
Yep. So just a reminder, why are we talking about migrations today? So what is the forcing factor in the businesses today asking about migration? The first one that's been going on for a while is organizations, they just don't want to own hardware anymore. There's too much risk of buying too much or too little of just the right components. Like you can buy a lot of storage and not enough compute or vice versa. Also, there's the challenge that comes with when you have hardware of your own. The price of that hardware and when you need to buy more and the lead time for those things, ever since COVID, they've been very erratic. And so you'll get surprises and you'll have to change your design or your architecture and use different models over time. So that's why organizations often, they just don't want the own hardware anymore. They prefer the simple model of pay for use. The other thing that's driving a lot of migration discussions today is that with the Broadcom VMware acquisition, things have changed in the licensing world with them. And for a few reasons, we won't go too much into detail here, but we've had people share with us privately that a 2x increase in license fees would be on the low end of what some people are experiencing. There's a lot of different models that VMware offered previously, and now they've consolidated and kind of optimized the offer of what they have. And as a result, there are people that are being served with more licensed technology than they may have been using before. And that's another reason these fees are going up. So this has also been bringing a lot of conversation about, okay, we really don't want to own hardware anymore. our fees for having our own hardware and software are going up. And then, oh yeah, by the way, the last one, this is kind of the one that really drives businesses to take action, is that they see their competitors are on these cloud models and they're able to just do things very quickly, be able to start up entire environments very quickly, duplicate an environment, move an environment to the West Coast. It all seems very simple. When you're in a cloud model, you can do things like that. And so for true pay-per-use, so this isn't the creative leasing model you'll see with some of the tier one hardware providers out there. This literally is, I pay by the hour for what I virtually deploy, and I can take that away at any time I feel like it, or I can deploy it at a different location. When you have that type of agility, now your technical resources within your company, they can be doing things such as getting you on that next version of the next level of whatever software stack or application stack or the next feature set that you would like to have. So this really is an opportunity for you to be able to do more with the same and be able to be agile and respond to market pressures a lot quicker. So we're going to talk about a couple of migration use cases to fill in a few of the blanks here. We've stayed a little bit high level when we talk about challenges and the drivers for making migrations. Now we want to get into some specifics so you can really appreciate the offer that's being presented in front of you today. So the first migration use case we want to talk about is that often, again, you'll find legacy environments all over the place that are on-prem that are using VLAN-based technologies. They might have a very strong Cisco-powered or Juniper-powered or any of the other big network providers that are out there. They may have a network that's run by one team in one organization, and then all of your virtualized server and storage assets may be delivered by another team on top of that. And so it's difficult to blend those back together and put them into such as a hyperscale software-defined data center type of a model. Well, the complexity comes because you have to transform that to be able to get that to your new flexible and agile type of site B that you'd like to be on. The simplicity that we offer here today has two big drivers to it, and there's some things underneath we're going to talk about. The first one is you can keep your VLAN model. So we are one of the only platforms out there in the market that supports a fully virtualized cloud computing service for you. But it can also support VPC networking model with all of those digital constraints. You can build networks on the fly, vRouters, security groups with all of those memberships of objects and load balancers and identity. All those things can be created through automation or infrastructure as code or through a GUI using the VPC networking construct. Again, it's aligned to be familiar with one of the biggest hyperscalers that are out there. Or you can choose to be on the VLAN model. And this is where a lot of ESX environments with VMware sit. They virtualized all of the compute, but it sits on top of a very, very strong and a very static network infrastructure. So with Zadara, you can keep your VLAN networking model, and you can keep that on-prem, which is also a differentiator in the market to be able to have a pay-per-use and still have that be at your on-prem if you like. This is really aimed at those organizations that, again, you may have data sovereignty that's starting to be a factor in your company's business, which doesn't allow you to simply move across state lines or different geographic boundaries, things like that. Again, being able to keep your VLANs is one of the big models here. But the second one is, now that you can keep your VLANs, you can do things such as stretch those VLANs. So let's say we're on-prem and we're sitting in the cabinet next to your existing infrastructure, or maybe we're in the top half of the cabinet and your old infrastructure's in the bottom half of that cabinet. By using stretch VLANs, you can now start to host some of your virtual machines in the old environment, and you can move them at a time and a place of your choosing over to the new environment with the Zadara and start paying for use. So you can get everything over to the other side of the river at a time and a choosing and a phasing of your choice, your decision. The other thing you can do with Zadara is you can use this for burst. So let's say you're buying new applications and you don't want to buy more technology for your on-prem. You can put a Zadara cloud into your on-prem site, and you can use us for deploying those new applications, and we'll fully integrate with your networks and where you want to, your VLANs that you already have in place. So this is one of the ways that we can make this very simple through the technology of how Zadara offers its hosting services. And then to speak for a moment about how Cloud Any lays on top of this, We're going to talk more about that in the next slide, actually, but I do want to give you the preview to say that this isn't just a technology offer that Arrosoft is bringing to the table here. If you wanted to do something such as what we're looking at on the slide here, they offer both the software technology and the Cloud Any, and they have the professional services bench to be able to actually manage these projects, the technical engineers to deliver these pieces of these projects. So just also keep that in mind as well. This isn't just newer technology with a lot of nice features to it. It can also be operated for you as a project. Suresh, why don't you take us to the second use case?
Yep, thank you, Jeff. So talking about the same migration use cases, right? Let's talk about the complexities, going back to the 4 pillars in the beginning of the slide, right? So aging hardware, we don't know what we don't know, right? Those are the unknown dependencies. If when you want to perform the migration, you got to make sure that beginning from the network layer, the firewall layer, the storage layers, right? There are multiple different teams needs to get involved. When we both organization with our alliance come into play in order to help you to do the phased approach, what we call as a forklift migration, right? Which means you don't need to change the mechanism of how you're functioning today, right? That's what I always see, right? When you want to bring in a change very specifically to the database administration team, that I want to quote that example here, they are not very well adopted for changes. They will simply say, you know what? Talking about backups, right? You go to them and say, hey, I want to install a new backup technology. You're going to change the mechanism of how you're performing the backups. Are you willing to do it? They will simply say no, right? They don't want to adapt it. So that is your big challenge there, right? So the way how we kind of integrated both the solutions, how Cloud Any works with Zadara, Zadara also looked deep and wide when they want to adopt end user data and compute into that. That's where Jeff touched upon saying, hey, VLAN, keep your VLAN. You don't have to change anything for me. I'm going to host you. Come in, play your data, bring up your application. But how are you going to forklift that compute and data, bringing that into Cloud in at Zadara? That's where Cloud Any plays a big role, right? We keep the consistencies in place with our professional services team and deliverables. We make sure it's a tailored approach-based deliverables, tailored to your requirement to make sure that we adopt exactly the configuration that you want to forklift and migrate to Zadara. Okay, we migrated it, right? You might have questions or doubts saying, hey, I want to test it. I want to make sure the migration is completed fine. How do you guarantee that, right? You have seen that. You've done a lot of DR tests, right? With my experience since 1996, I've worked with multiple different companies. I've done tons and tons of data center migration. It's always comes into the mind. Okay, I migrated the data. Will my application come online? Or which means I need to shut down my production server. How do I validate it? The way how we have designed this and work with Zadara, your production can continue to run at any given point of time. Even though it's a stretched VLAN, we work with you to make sure the migration is configured in an appropriate manner. So this can come up in a different set of IP addresses, completely different bubble, completely different ecosystem. You can bring it up in a dev test mode. Your applications team can validate it along with our PS team support. And we will document everything for you, step-by-step process to give you a standard operating procedure to make your life easy, right? So once the migration is done, so you're coming out of the complexity format, taking your journey into more simplified format, both from technology perspective and also project management perspective, and also complementing on the licensing, not compromising on security and performance. So we want to make sure that we offer you the services in a slow platter with white glove services.
Yep, so let's dip into some disaster recovery use cases. For those service provider partners of ours that are also watching this webinar, this could be an area that if you're not delivering DR services for your customers, your constituents today, this could be an opportunity for you to also expand the service footprint that you have and continue to expand the value chain that you extend to your customers. But for everybody on the webinar, let's talk about that when you are protecting a workload in site A, and you want to have something over at site B that you can either use for dev test, you can use it for your DR when you need that. There's a number of things that you're going to need a very mechanized and reliable system in place to be able to replicate to site B. But let's not forget that the network and all the interdependencies and everything need to still operate the same over at site B. So this oftentimes means you have to reconfigure site A to be more friendly to either a cloud model that would be typical with VPC, the hyperscalers, with many of the cloud providers that were discussed earlier in this call today. Or simplicity would be, you can still keep your same network dependencies and your network design and configurations in place that you have in site A. You can replicate those over in site B. And so what this allows you to do is focus much more on how you're just creating that landing pad in site B that looks like site A. And now your same resources they can focus on as you buy your new applications. They can think about, do they want to use those VPC networking models of the future, but they're not forced to. By the way, just doubling down on that message, there'll be organizations today that have a lot of legacy applications, but all the new things they're buying are containerized. They want Kubernetes managed clusters. That's fine. With the Zadara platform, you can have your VLAN-based parts of the same tenant. You can have projects that are VLAN-based in the way that the network operates, and they can have other projects that are using VPC. In this DR use case model, that customer can have both legacy and containerized workloads, and the same DR processes would be available to be able to migrate them over to site B. And again, it's really, the focus here is about business continuity and having that disaster recovery that's well instrumented and reliably works. But it's also so that you can do things such as, well, now that I have a site B, maybe that's what I start using for some of my test and dev workloads at times. It starts to open up the aperture wider when you don't have to spend all your time reconfiguring site A so that site B can look more like it. You can make site B look like site A from the very first change. Suresh, maybe you can take us through the one-to-many. I thought this one was very interesting.
Thank you, Jeff. So, yep, tagging along with Jeff's conversation, that was very well thoughtfully presented in the previous slide, right? So there are multiple different DR use cases. I touched upon this in the past slides, right? By default, any customer definitely would like to have a secondary site, right? That's what is called as your second life, right? Primary site in DR data center. Now with all these cybersecurity events happening, ransomware, NIST releasing, CIS releasing that, hey, you at least need to have 3 copies of your data set, 3 to 1. So a lot of customers started thinking that I need to have multi-site replication. How easy it is in order to configure this, right? You don't, with our partnership with Zadara and our alliance and software development that we have done with Cloud.any, it's not that you don't have to jump through hoops. Very straightforward. It's simplistic configuration that you need to make. Let's say you migrated your data from your production site to Zadara, let's say it's sitting in USCs. Now, at any given point of time, you're saying, hey, I'm sitting in USCs. Now I want to have a DR solution going to you, central location Zadara. And as per my requirement, I also want to have a DR site for my dev UAT in West Coast. Pretty much possible. All we need to do is like add them as an additional targets, make some changes in the replication policies, and initiate the replication in a parallel cascaded manner. That's it, right? It's like once set it, keep it simple, set it done, and it continues to work. We don't believe in complexities. We want to make sure the complexities are reduced down, and we want to offer you what is called a simplicity by providing the best use case of Zadara, best of the world from Zadara, and as well as Arrosoft Cloud.any and our PS team. Our configuration will depend on what you need. Can be multi-site failover, multiple recovery points, right? You can have, you may ask, okay, I want to have my production site replicating every 15 minutes. I want to have my dev test replicating every 2 hours. Do you think it's possible? Absolutely possible. You can create consistency groups. So your dev test can go to only one data center, but your production can be replicating from site 1 to site B to site C, right? And they can have as much as possible recovery point. Recommended is 15 minutes, but you can also go a little lower than that. If you want to have that RTO and RPO to meet your business continuity requirements, and you want to roll back to the previous day, that is just the retention value that we can define it. Schedule-based, calendar-based, multiple different mechanisms we can execute this DR replication process as per your need. Thank you, Jeff.
Yes, very nice. So as we start to wrap up on our messages here, because we want to get to the Q&A session, let's summarize a couple of the things that we've reviewed today. First of all, in introducing Zadara, you can see that we really take operations and we can simplify the complexity you find there. It's delivered through a pay-per-use cloud model. It can be on-prem, so you've got your sovereign cloud model now. It's just for you. You have data locality, you have low latency for those applications that need low latency connections. It can be burst capacity. It's very easy to migrate in and out of. There's a lot of benefits that help you lower your operating costs in the big picture scheme of things, and also future-proof your infrastructure and create that agility, if you will. We also have seen that with the Zadara and Arrosoft solution, you can migrate and or you can create DR without having to transform the environments you already have. That's been a big difference maker. We have one service provider, to make an example. They have seven locations in the United States, so they've got a pretty big footprint. And for all of their VM workloads that they bring over to Zadara, they use our VLAN networking model. Ever since we introduced that, that's been their default. That's all that they use, simply because they don't want to have that discussion with their customers. Oh, you have to transform your environment to be able to move over to this new model and pay for use. The benefit for that service provider also is that when those same customers they have talk about containerized workloads, I mean, remember all the benefits of containers, right? So you can literally just go download an instance of MariaDB fully configured with all the backup mechanisms you'd like to have in there. That's now delivered as a containerized application, and it's very easy to manage. Well, for those customers that want to go Kubernetes to complement their existing legacy environments, they can enjoy that with the Zadara-powered platform, because the same tenant, same logins, same identities, passwords, permissions, all that bits can be floating around projects where they've got the legacy mode of networking, or they've got the VPC model where Kubernetes can live and do all of that auto-scaling. And then the last bit that we talked about today, again, this one we can't underscore enough. This was really that reference to the iceberg on the previous slide. It's, you know, in the first view of a lot of these projects, you understand the scope and the size of what you're dealing with, but it's oftentimes looking underneath the water, you really see the enormity of this challenge of either migration or creating secondary sites. And with a well-instrumented tool like the CloudAny and a professional services bench that can also back that up and bring their experience to help to deliver that, you can buy them in other models. Arrosoft will work with you on just licensing the CloudAny technology to you, or they'll also deliver it as a project, a fully managed project. This now allows you to press an easy button that not only has a lot of support and instrumentation for getting across the bridge to the site B, but it's got all this robust capability of failing backwards, failing forwards, running test instances of applications. So hopefully our webinar today has brought some new capabilities to light for many of you and has opened up your thinking to some new possibilities to how you could be migrating your workloads simply because we've made it a lot easier. So Lisa, maybe you can bring us to the Q&A session.
Thanks, Jeff. We do have one question here. What about costs in Zadara, on the Zadara side, the CA server plus the EBS's source VMs?
Mm-hmm. Yep, so the short answer to that is like the hyperscalers, because we're pay per use, you can pay for infrastructure that runs 365 days a year. So that'll be a storage appearance of all the copies, the recovery points that you want to define inside Site B, plus a single virtual machine, which will run the essence of the CloudAny software at your Site B. Now that's for a DR protected scenario. In a migration project, you'll also have some other bits because you'll want to have the VMs as they get to the new site. They'll only be provisioned upon demand, so they're only there for when you need them. You can also turn them off afterwards if you want to do some robust user acceptance testing after the fact. But due to the fact that we're only pay for use, we are as nimble and we're very sharp on the pricing to where you're only paying for exactly what you need, which you exactly need all of your recovery point copies, and you exactly need one virtual machine to run the whole CloudAny solution on the Zadara side.
That's correct, yeah.
Anything else?
We do. How long would it take to migrate 20 VMs across an internet link?
Suresh would have some good answers around this one, I think.
Yeah, so let me take that question, right? So a couple of factors, right? It depends. The first form factor is like rehosting the data. That's going to take a little bit of time, depending. For example, I'll bring up the benchmarking test that we have done, couple of VMs with 250 gig, with 1 gig 5, took about 20 to 30 minutes for the full sync. And after that, incremental syncs with Delta changes, pretty fast, right? And you want to provision it and bring it online simultaneously, can be done under an hour. When I say that, it's a phased approach. Migration is use case number one. That all depends upon your WAN bandwidth. You know, how beefy your WAN bandwidth, how is the utilization, how much you're slicing and dicing it. And once it is done, Delta is going to be very fast. Failover, failback is all orchestrated, right? It's all orchestrated, automated. You don't have to click one by one in order to fail it over. You can perform a group consistency group failover. Could be done under an hour, so it's pretty straightforward.
Very good.
Thank you, Suresh. Another question we have is, what is the enterprise storage that is being referred, and how is it different from VPSA, OpenStack, and KVM used for manager? How does this work under the cover?
Yep, so the references you'll see in this presentation today for enterprise storage are all of those modalities of storage. We'll start from the top and then work our way down. So EBS is a name that was originally coined, I believe it was by Amazon. They called it their elastic block storage, and the industry's taken on EBS as a common generalized term. We offer that in the zCompute platform, and you're charged by the hour per the gigabyte for appearances of storage. So if you have a Windows server with a 50 gig C drive or a boot volume, you'll be charged for 50 gigabytes of storage for as long as that C volume is alive. Beneath that, you'll see that we have in our compute platform VPSA, which is our patented technology for partitioning and delivering that consistent performance layer around storage. That's how we provision all of these volumes that present themselves as EBS volumes in our stack. Now, one of the reasons that that's an important fact is that for customers of Zadara that are using VMware today, you could use us as your storage tier underneath VMware, and you would enjoy the fact that VPSA could deploy 50 or 150 or however many volumes you would use on your VMware. And we're storage area network technology, so you can do things like snapshots, data reduction, all of those capabilities you would typically look for in an enterprise solution, along with encrypted data in transit and data at rest with keys that you manage. All those things are available when you use us as storage for your VMware. When you move over to zCompute, guess what? It's the same infrastructure. It's just presented in this pay for by the individual volume per the gigabyte that you get in that hyperscaler-like model. So you get the best of both worlds. While you're still using a VMware type of technology, we can look just like a SAN that you would buy for yourself and present just the same with all those capabilities. So when you have data reduction, you get to take advantage of that, not the hyperscaler. And when you do that with us on zCompute, you get those benefits just the same.
Thank you. Another question, what is the minimum RPO for DR?
Sure, yeah, I'll take that question. So the default configuration is 15 minutes, right? Where you can continue to create snapshots every 15 minutes, but you can also go as low as all the way up to 5 minutes. I would want to answer that saying we're not zero downtime replication or migration technology. We want to provide the industry best practice standard in order to have application and crash consistent. The default is 15 minutes, but we can customize it down all the way up to 5 minutes. And the RPO depends on how frequently, how many snapshots that you want to maintain based on the retention values. Hope I answered the question.
Thank you. How is ISCSI being used? When is it considered as not so secure due to the floating nature of the IQN?
Yep, so iSCSI protocol is, again, something that we use very often in supporting block storage to hypervisors like VMware ESX. We provide that to Nutanix and some other technologies. OpenStack, KVM was mentioned earlier, that's another one. So it's a very well understood standard. And with a lot of our customers that are integrating to VPSA, they're using VLAN isolation to guarantee that bad actors that don't have business interacting with the storage layer don't have an access path to get to the storage layer. That's the first one. The second one about the floating nature of the IPs. So our technology, I mentioned the patented VPSA technology, also adopts best practices of host registration. And so that is to say, if you have these appearances of storage volumes, you can indicate which servers by IP address or network range are allowed to see that storage. The other advanced feature that Zadara has you don't typically see in storage market is that we'll reverse monitor those servers that are allowed to see our storage. So if you start to see ESX servers dropping like flies, you'll actually get tickets from Zadara saying, hey, Mr. Customer, you're having us monitor your VMware, and we actually see you have a problem there. And so I just answered the question with it's a very secure protocol, very well-known technology in the field for block storage. By the way, when we take a look at how zCompute delivers its storage to its virtual machines, that's not using the iSCSI protocol in the virtualized space of those virtual machines. Like ESX server, the actual presentation of the storage to the virtual machine itself is done through a set of network drivers. And then beneath that, there's an iSCSI layer for which we do the same thing. We use VLAN-based isolation to guarantee that there aren't hosts on that same network, layer 3-wise or layer 2. They can see the storage. They don't have business to be using that storage.
Thank you, Jeff. Next question from a source, 1 TB VM. How much storage is used in target Zadara for DR?
So I think the question is framed as if there's a virtual machine with a terabyte of data storage, it could be on one or multiple volumes. How much data would be required on site B to actually protect that virtual machine with the 1 terabyte of data? Suresh, as I've gone ahead and outlined the question, you want to go ahead and provide that answer?
Yeah, so there is no dedupe involved in here. So it's a block-to-block replication. And we do know the white spaces are there in the disk space. I would say for a terabyte of volume, we are going to replicate the disk assets, right? The disk is going to go in as a terabyte of volume. It's not just white space-based replication. But after the initial migration is done, then we go into the nitty-gritties to understand which block, similar to VMware CBT technology, we go underlie the kernel-based module to do the file system on the disk-based replication. We only replicate the non-white spaces, which is the actual data set, right? So that will be delta changes. But the migration for the DR replication, it will be disk assets. You have a terabyte of volume. Let's say you use 300 gig, 700 gig of white spaces. It will still create a volume of terabyte.
Yep, and I can extend some of that information a little bit further by saying with some of the hyperscaler models, they'll do the same thing as what was just described. So a terabyte at site A is going to be charged as a terabyte at site B. But what's also a difference is that as you start to use more of those blocks of data, as Suresh was just starting to talk about, you can get into variable fees with the hyperscalers where you are keeping it simple as Zadara, where there's just a charge by the hour, by the gigabyte for your appearance of storage. And it's that simple.
Great, thank you. Those are all the questions we have.
Okay, well, so want to leave just a quick message at the end here that if any of you are curious for a follow-up, we have both in the invite you received a way to follow up or getting a call scheduled. We have, I spoke earlier about this closer to the customer experience that customers receive. That's both with the Zadara and an Arrosoft solution. We're more nimble organizations. We're not the size of a Microsoft or a Google or an Amazon. So you'll enjoy the fact that you'll have a lot closer engagement style with us. And you can feel free to bring us a lot more ideas or questions about things you're looking to solve and challenges you're looking at today. We'll be very happy to discuss with you what you could be looking like in this new model that we presented for you today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.
Suresh.
Thank you.
Thanks to all who attended today. We'll send out a copy of the slides for you as well as the recording. Thank you very much. Take care, everybody.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.